I remember the night her name fell from grace, because the chandeliers seemed to dim in sympathy, their crystal prisms trembling as if they too understood disgrace. The ballroom breathed perfume and heat, silk and expectation, yet silence rippled outward when laughter struck her back like thrown gravel. Miss Eleanor Ashcombe stood alone beneath the gilt ceiling, gloved hands folded, spine unbent, while society performed its oldest ritual, smiling as it withdrew mercy. In that instant, her family's sins became her inheritance, and London decided she would carry them quietly, beautifully, and without complaint, for generations yet unborn to remember. She had known whispers before, of course. Whispers were the background music of her girlhood. Yet this was different, sharpened by unanimity, perfected by intention. Fans paused mid-flutter, eyes slid away, and a mother's hand tightened upon her daughter's sleeve. Eleanor felt the judgment pass over her skin like a cold draft through an ill-fitted door. She did not cry. She had learned early that tears fed the crowd. Instead, she lifted her chin, as if dignity alone might stitch together what reputation had been so efficiently torn. That hope was thin, fraying, but stubbornly hazed still against the night. It was then that the Duke of Ravensmere observed her, though she did not yet know his name had already been spoken in rooms where ruin was planned. He stood apart from the laughter, a dark figure carved from patience and iron, one glove hand resting upon a silver-topped cane. His eyes, cool and assessing, followed Eleanor with the interest of a man accustomed to measuring consequences. He had been sent to finish what gossip began, to erase the Ashcombes' last fragile standing, and he had never failed an assignment before. Duty had shaped him. Mercy rarely entered calculations ever. From his vantage, he saw what others ignored: the restraint in her shoulders, the careful economy of breath, the quiet courage of remaining when flight would have been kinder. Society loved spectacle, but Eleanor offered none. The Duke had dismantled fortunes with signatures and silences, yet something in her stillness unsettled him. She did not beg, nor soften, nor attempt charm. She simply endured. In that endurance lay a challenge, faint but undeniable, and for the first time that evening, calculation faltered beneath something dangerously close to curiosity. It was unwelcome, unprofitable, and therefore deeply troubling to him alone tonight. Eleanor felt his gaze before she saw him, a weight distinct from mockery, sharper than pity. Turning, she met eyes the color of stormed steel, set in a face disciplined by command. He inclined his head, not quite a bow, a gesture measured to offend no one and promise nothing. Heat climbed her throat, though she could not have said why. She knew only that this man belonged to the machinery grinding her family down. The instinct to look away warred with an older, defiant resolve to be seen, if only as a witness to injustice unfolding there, tonight. Still, a ripple moved through the assembly as the Duke stepped forward, conversation stuttering like a damaged clock. He crossed the polished floor with unhurried grace, every stride a small assertion of power. When he stopped before Eleanor, the space around them seemed to thin, as if oxygen itself had been claimed. He spoke her name carefully, each syllable shaped with intention, and offered his arm. It was not gallantry, it was provocation. Accepting would mark her, refusing would confirm her exile. All of London leaned inward to see which humiliation she would choose, and whether dignity could survive another test. Her fingers trembled once, betraying her, then steadied. Eleanor placed her hand upon his sleeve, feeling the strength beneath fine wool, and allowed herself to be led. The murmurs swelled, thick with speculation, yet she focused on the cadence of his steps, the deliberate pace that shielded her from the crowd's teeth. Up close, he smelled faintly of rain and smoke, a reminder of worlds beyond drawing rooms. He did not smile. Instead, he murmured, so softly only she could hear, a sentence that cut deeper than any insult, delivered with elegance, restraint, and an unmistakable edge tonight. Alone, here. I wonder, he said, voice level as glass, how much ruin one woman may endure with grace. That was all. No apology followed, nor cruelty, only observation. Eleanor's breath caught, not from the words themselves, but from the certainty behind them. This man did not traffic in idle remarks. Around them, the orchestra resumed, bows scraping strings into civility, yet the world had shifted. The Duke escorted her through the dance as if escorting a verdict, and she understood, dimly, that she had stepped into the path of something vast and deliberate, whose purpose would soon eclipse her comprehension entirely. What Eleanor could not know, as the final notes faded and applause restored polite order, was that ink had already dried against her family's future. In offices far from candlelight and music, the Duke's instructions had been carried out with impeccable efficiency. Credit withdrawn. Allies warned away. Doors closed before they were even knocked upon. Tonight's humiliation was merely the overture. The true destruction would arrive quietly, in ledgers and letters, leaving no villain visible enough to curse. And yet, as he released her hand, something in his expression suggested hesitation, brief and dangerous, like a crack within his resolve. Eleanor left the ballroom before dawn broke, carriage wheels hissing over wet stone, her heart aching with a confusion sharper than shame. She sensed that her fall had gained a witness, perhaps even an architect, though she could not yet distinguish which he was. Behind her, Ravensmere remained amid the dying candles, aware that the mission entrusted to him had acquired a face, a voice, and an inconvenient weight. For the first time in his ordered life, loyalty wavered, not toward a woman, but toward the unsettling possibility that destruction might no longer be his chosen end. From that night, London did not forgive swiftly, but it gossiped tirelessly, and within days Eleanor Ashcombe felt the weight of attention sharpen rather than fade. Doors once ajar closed with apologetic smiles, and invitations arrived already regretful, their phrasing a masterpiece of polite exclusion. She walked through streets that seemed unchanged, yet every reflection in shop glass returned a woman subtly diminished. The memory of the Duke's arm, firm and unyielding, lingered like pressure on her skin, confusing gratitude with dread. If his intervention had rescued her from ridicule, it had also branded her as something discussed in drawing rooms everywhere now. The first token arrived without warning, borne by a footman whose livery announced wealth before courtesy. A crate of white camellias filled her family's modest hall, their petals flawless, unnervingly fresh, defiant of season and scents. No card accompanied them, yet Eleanor knew the sender instantly, her pulse answering before reason. Such flowers were declarations, not gifts, and London understood their language well. By afternoon, whispers connected her disgrace to Ravensmore's favor, transforming her from victim to suspect, from pitted daughter to ambitious schemer. She burned beneath their assumptions, silent and furious, yet outwardly composed as ever, under watchful eyes. The Duke neither wrote nor called, which itself became a statement sharpened by absence. Eleanor encountered him instead beneath gaslight one damp evening. The meeting as accidental as fate ever allowed. He returned her fallen glove with exquisite formality, his fingers lingering an instant too long. Around them, passers-by slowed, sensing drama like hounds scenting blood. His courtesy shielded her, yet his silence accused her, and she wondered whether his kindness had been calculated from the beginning, another mechanism designed to tighten the snare. Her heart answered with unwelcome curiosity and fear that refused reason entirely, despite her resolve alone. Scandal ripened quickly, fed by gifts and glances, and Eleanor's name appeared in conversations never spoken to her face. Mothers warned sons away. Daughters stared with hungry fascination. When the Duke escorted her briefly at the opera, applause fractured into murmurs sharp as broken glass. She felt both protected and exposed, her dignity stretched thin between gratitude and humiliation. Each public kindness from him cost her another private mercy from society, until even her family began to fear the price of his attention. They spoke cautiously, hope bruised by dread, as creditors circled closer daily, in quiet, counting silence together. Eleanor confronted him at last in a conservatory heavy with winter roses, her composure honed to a blade. She thanked him for the flowers, each word deliberate, and asked whether ruin always arrived scented so sweetly. The Duke listened without interruption, his expression unreadable, eyes reflecting candlelight like frozen water. When he answered, His voice was courteous, distant, and devastatingly honest. He spoke of interest, of circumstance, of inevitability, never denying the harm, never explaining its source. Power lay beneath every syllable, disciplined and cold. She sensed restraint battling something newly awakened within his controlled demeanor that unsettled her deeply. Days later, the second token arrived, crueler for its subtlety. A notice from her father's bank lay upon the breakfast table, polite in tone, merciless in effect. Credit withdrawn. Accounts reviewed. Eleanor read the Duke's name between the lines, felt it press upon her lungs. His protection had not saved them. It had accelerated the fall. Rage replaced confusion, burning clean and bright. Whatever game Ravensmere played, it required her suffering, and she resolved then to confront him without courtesy or fear, regardless of consequence or reputation. For dignity had little left to lose in the coming reckoning she suspected. They met again beneath storm clouds, the city hushed as if listening. Eleanor accused him openly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The Duke did not deny his involvement. That restraint, too, felt like an insult. He spoke of obligations owed to men long dead, of debts inherited like titles. For a moment, the mask slipped, revealing fatigue etched deep. She saw then that his power was not freedom, but a chain polished until invisible. The knowledge unsettled her anger, complicating resolve, yet did nothing to lessen harm already inflicted upon her family by his hand alone. London responded swiftly, as it always did, sensing blood in still water. Editorials hinted, caricatures circulated, and Eleanor's reputation hardened into caricature. Some called her calculating, others compromised. Ravensmere's name hovered nearby, lending menace and allure in equal measure. Invitations ceased entirely now, and even charity turned conditional. Eleanor felt herself shrinking in public spaces, while in private her resolve grew iron. If society insisted upon a narrative, she would learn its author and demand the truth directly, no matter the cost to pride or the consequences awaiting them both. This was no longer endurance. It was preparation for war. The Duke, meanwhile, found his careful balance eroding. Each report delivered to him now carried Eleanor's face between its lines, her voice echoing through margins. He delayed decisions, questioned orders, and discovered the discomfort of conscience awakening. His gifts, once instruments, had become confessions he could not retract. Power remained his, yet mastery slipped, replaced by an unfamiliar urge to explain himself to a woman who owed him nothing. This instability frightened him more than any political threat, for it suggested vulnerability where he had cultivated certainty and control over every outcome, including his own heart against intention and training. The revelation came quietly, delivered like a blade wrapped in silk. Eleanor learned, through a sympathetic clerk, that Ravensmere himself had signed the order ending her family's credit. The truth struck deeper than rumor ever had. He was not merely witness or rescuer, but architect of her undoing. As night settled, she held the paper until it trembled, anger sharpening into resolve. Somewhere across the city, the Duke stood before a fire, aware that his name had reached her at last, and nothing would remain unchanged between them, save the reckoning still to come, burning patiently beneath civility and silence. I remember the night they finally stood alone together, because silence pressed heavier than accusation. The Duke's library smelled of leather and extinguished candles, the storm outside tapping insistently against tall windows. Eleanor entered without invitation, her grief worn sharp into resolve, her gloved hands empty of courtesy. She did not curtsy. He did not rise. Between them lay months of unspoken harm, gifts that wounded, and rumors that clung like soot. Power and pride circled cautiously, aware that something irrevocable waited within the quiet, demanding honesty neither had yet offered. Both understood the door had closed behind her forever. He broke first, not with apology but confession shaped by duty. His voice remained measured, though strain threaded its calm, as he admitted the truth she already sensed. He had been commanded to dismantle the Ashcombs, to starve influence until pride collapsed. He spoke of obligations inherited like titles, of men who collected loyalty as currency. Eleanor listened without interruption, each sentence striking deeper than anger. When he said her name, softly, it sounded almost like regret. She realized then he had never lied to her, only withheld mercy with deliberate care, for reasons that now felt dangerously personal indeed. Eleanor answered with a steadiness that surprised even herself. She spoke of her family's quiet decency, of years spent avoiding excess and scandal, of a fool engineered without trial. Shame surfaced. Yes, but beneath it burned anger honed by restraint. She told him his flowers had mocked her, his protection had isolated her, and his silence had been crueler than open disdain. The Duke absorbed each charge without defense, his gaze unwavering. In that stillness, she felt power shift slightly, as if truth itself had weight enough to move him. The room seemed to lean inward, listening with held breath. The storm outside deepened, thunder rolling like judgment, and something in him fractured. He confessed the hesitation that had crept into his decisions, the sleeplessness, the growing awareness that destroying her family now felt like self-mutilation. He admitted admiration, then something more perilous, that her dignity had unsettled his certainty. Eleanor saw the cost of his power etched in lines beside his mouth, understood that obedience had been his lifelong refuge. For the first time, he was afraid of his own resolve failing him, and that fear made him dangerously human before her unwavering gaze that night alone together there. Silence returned, altered, heavy with consequence. Eleanor felt her anger loosen, not into forgiveness, but clarity. She recognized the enormity of his choice, continue and secure his standing, or falter and invite ruin. The knowledge bound them briefly as equals, each trapped by circumstance. He stepped closer, careful not to touch her, and offered her a bargain spoken like a confession. She could use his name to shield her family, to restore access and credit, but the cost would be her reputation, bound publicly to his. It was salvation wrapped in scandal and sacrifice that demanded her consent alone entirely. Eleanor considered him with a calm born of exhaustion. To accept would preserve a family while destroying herself in quieter ways. To refuse would doom them and free her conscience. She asked him whether he would survive such defiance, whether he could endure the loss his mercy might provoke. His answer came without pause. He did not know. The honesty startled her more than any vow. In that admission lay vulnerability, and with it, the terrible truth that whatever followed would scar them both permanently. The storm broke, rain striking glass like applause for a tragedy unfolding inside them both. He turned away then, granting her space, as though already yielding control. Eleanor felt the pull of his offered protection and the weight of her own pride collide. She understood that love had not yet been named, but its shadow darkened every choice. When he spoke again, it was with restraint sharpened to pain. He told her if he completed his task, she would despise him, and if he abandoned it, he would lose everything. The words hovered between them, an unfinished verdict awaiting her response. Her heart beat loudly, refusing easy answers while destiny waited, patient and cruel. Eleanor did not answer him then. Instead, she removed her gloves, placing them upon the table like a surrender that was not submission. She said only that she required time, and that he must decide whether his loyalty lay with ghosts or the living. The Duke inclined his head, acknowledging a truth that cut deeper than accusation. In that moment, their positions shifted. She was no longer prey, nor he sole predator. They stood as conspirators against a future neither could fully foresee. The fire hissed softly, sealing the pact unspoken between wounded pride and dangerous hope for them both. When Eleanor departed, dawn threatened the horizon, pale and uncertain. She carried no promises, only knowledge sharpened into resolve. Outside, the city stirred, unaware that a quiet rebellion had begun in Ravensmore's library. The Duke remained behind, staring into dying embers, aware that the machinery he commanded could not be halted without consequence. He understood now that neutrality was impossible. Whatever path he chose would end the man he had been. In choosing whether to save her family, he would determine the fate of his own soul. The choice loomed, vast and unforgiving, before him as daylight crept closer still. Eleanor reached home as bells marked the hour, her future poised between scandal and salvation. She knew the Duke's offer would not fade, nor would the danger it carried. Somewhere in the city, Ravensmere prepared to decide whether loyalty to power outweighed the pull of conscience awakened by her defiance. Their fates, once separate, now converged with perilous intimacy. As Eleanor folded the glove she had left behind in memory, she sensed that the next time they met, choice would give way to consequence, and love, unnamed still, would demand its price in whispers history would never record their story. The night of decision arrived dressed as celebration, its cruelty masked by silk and light. The grand hall bloomed with chandeliers, each crystal trembling as if aware of the verdict about to be delivered beneath them. Eleanor entered on her father's arm, her gown restrained in color yet uncompromising in cut, dignity stitched into every seam. Whispers followed her like shadows, but she did not falter. Across the room, the Duke of Ravensmere stood among ministers and heirs, his presence commanding without effort, his expression carved from resolve that had cost him sleep and certainty both. Music swelled, a polite tide meant to smooth discord, yet tension coiled tightly beneath the melodies. Eleanor felt the weight of expectation press upon her ribs, the memory of his offer burning quietly within her. She had chosen nothing yet, but tonight would not permit delay. The Duke watched her with an intensity stripped of calculation, aware that every eye marked their distance. When he moved toward her, conversation stuttered, anticipation sharpening into something near hunger. He offered his arm, not privately now, but before witnesses who understood the magnitude of such a gesture. Eleanor accepted, her hand steady, her heart unyielding. They crossed the floor together, each step measured, each breath an act of defiance. At the center, beneath the brightest light, the Duke halted. The music faded, as if obedient to his will, and silence bloomed, vast and unforgiving. He turned to Eleanor, his voice carrying without effort, calm as winter water. He spoke her name with respect that startled even her, then addressed the assembly. He named the Ashcombs not as disgraced, but as honorable, correcting falsehoods he himself had once fed. Murmurs rippled outward, disbelief colliding with outrage, while Eleanor felt the ground shift beneath her feet. He continued, unflinching, acknowledging his role in their suffering with a candor that stripped power of its armor. He did not beg forgiveness, nor excuse necessity. Instead, he claimed responsibility as one might claim a wound. The words fell like stones, reshaping the room's fragile order. Eleanor's breath caught, pride and fear warring fiercely. This was more than protection. It was self-immolation performed with composure. She realized then that he had chosen, and in doing so, surrendered everything that had once defined him. Love remained unspoken, yet its shape stood unmistakable between them, demanding recognition. Reaction came swiftly, brutal in its precision. Allies withdrew, faces hardening, calculations revised mid-glance. A minister departed without farewell. A matron whispered behind her fan, scandal renewed but redirected. Eleanor felt eyes upon her, some accusing, others newly curious. The Duke turned to her then, offering a quiet reassurance meant only for her. In that small kindness, she recognized the man beneath the title, stripped of armor and pretense. He escorted her from the floor amid fractured applause, dignity salvaged through audacity. The night pressed onward, but nothing within it remained unchanged for either of them now. Later, in a quieter antechamber scented with beeswax and roses, the Duke delivered the final blow to his former life. Before witnesses, he resigned his appointed post, relinquishing authority with measured grace. The act stunned even those who had anticipated rebellion. Eleanor watched, stunned by the scale of his sacrifice, understanding that no return remained. When they stood alone at last, the distance between them felt altered, intimate and charged. He told her softly that her family's protection was secured beyond reversal. The gift was irrevocable, stripped of condition, offered not as leverage but as atonement for harm done. Eleanor searched his face, seeing loss etched freshly there, yet also a fragile relief. She thanked him, the words insufficient but sincere. He did not ask for gratitude, nor for her hand, nor for promise. That restraint moved her more deeply than any declaration could have. They spoke briefly, carefully, acknowledging consequences neither could undo. Outside, celebration continued, oblivious to the quiet dismantling of a powerful man's future. Eleanor sensed that society would punish them both in subtler ways still. Yet beneath fear, a fierce calm took root, born of choice rather than survival alone, and it steadied her remarkably. As dawn threatened beyond curtained windows, they parted without embrace, understanding that victory rarely allowed tenderness. Eleanor returned home changed, reputation suspended between ruin and intrigue, her family safe yet her own future uncertain. The Duke remained behind, watching embers fade, the echo of chandeliers replaced by silence earned. He had traded dominance for integrity, certainty for consequence. London would not forgive quickly, yet for the first time, his reflection did not accuse him. He had acted not from command, but conviction, and that knowledge anchored him against the coming storm that loomed ahead relentlessly. News traveled faster than mercy. By morning, alliances fractured, invitations rescinded, influence evaporated. Eleanor felt the aftershocks immediately, doors closing even as others opened cautiously. She received letters praising courage, condemning impropriety, offering curiosity thinly veiled as concern. Through it all, she sensed Ravensmore's absence like a held breath. He did not write, nor did she. Their declaration had been made in action, not ink. The restraint preserved something fragile between them, neither daring to name it while consequences unfolded. Yet the memory of his voice that night sustained her, a promise without language still alive. That evening, as Eleanor stood by her window watching gaslights flicker awake, a sealed document arrived, bearing Ravensmore's crest. Inside lay confirmation of his resignation, final and absolute. No note accompanied it. She pressed the paper to her chest, understanding that the climax had passed, but the reckoning had not. Somewhere, the Duke faced a future stripped bare by choice, while she stood at the threshold of scandal transformed into possibility. Their paths, once bound by ruin, now converged by sacrifice. And though silence separated them, it vibrated with unfinished words and a love poised dangerously close to being claimed. I remember the ending not for its grandeur, but for its quietness, because history often records noise while love prefers silence. Eleanor Ashcombe's world had narrowed since that night of declaration, reduced from glittering halls to a countryside estate modest enough to escape scrutiny. Morning light now replaced chandeliers, falling gently across worn floors and unremarkable furniture. Yet within that simplicity lay a peace she had never known, forged by choice rather than concession. Her family was safe, their names steadied if not restored, and that knowledge anchored her as rumors continued their restless migration through London, deprived now of her immediate presence. The Duke of Ravensmere arrived without herald or carriage procession, his approach announced only by the crunch of gravel beyond the window. Eleanor felt him before she saw him, the same instinct that had warned her in ballrooms and libraries alike. When he entered the room, travel dust still clinging to his coat, he looked altered, not diminished but unarmored. Power no longer settled upon him like a second skin. In its absence, something truer had emerged, quieter and more deliberate. He bowed, deeply this time, not as duke but as man, and waited, hands empty, eyes steady. She did not rush toward him. Eleanor had learned the value of stillness, of allowing moments to declare themselves. She studied his face, noting the absence of strain she had mistaken once for strength. He spoke first, his voice lower, unguarded, confessing nothing new, asking nothing at all. He said only that he had come to see her, to know whether the cost he had paid had preserved what mattered. The simplicity of the question stripped it of strategy. For the first time, she saw uncertainty without fear, humility without performance, and it unsettled her more deeply than his former authority ever had. They walked together through the estate's small garden, autumn pressing color into every leaf. Eleanor spoke then, recounting the aftermath, the letters, the fragile rebuilding of trust. She did not spare him the truth of difficulty, nor did she dwell upon grievance. He listened as he always had, but now without the reflex to measure advantage. When she finished, he stopped, turning to her with care, and said he did not come to ask forgiveness, for that would presume entitlement. He came to offer constancy, if she wished it, and absence, if she did not. The choice, finally, was hers alone. Emotion rose swiftly, threatening composure she had honed through trial. Eleanor felt anger stir, not sharp now, but aching, born of love tested before it could be named. She told him what his actions had cost her, the nights of doubt, the slow erosion of certainty. She told him she had hated him, briefly and fiercely, and that the hatred frightened her more than affection ever could. He accepted every word as consequence, nodding once, his eyes dark with understanding. In that acceptance, she recognized respect deeper than apology, and something within her loosened, at last. They stood beneath an old tree, branches thinning against the sky, and Eleanor made her choice without drama. She told him she did not forgive lightly, nor forget easily, but she believed in redemption earned through sacrifice. She believed in a man who relinquished power rather than misuse it. She believed, most dangerous of all, that love might be built not from rescue, but recognition. When she reached for his hand, it was deliberate, unhurried, her fingers firm. He closed his around hers as if holding something sacred, breathing out a sound that might have been relief or reverence, or both. The world did not resolve itself neatly afterward. London remained fickle, doors opening cautiously, others sealed forever. Ravensmere lived without title's shield now, learning the discipline of obscurity. Yet in that quiet, he flourished, discovering worth beyond command. Eleanor returned occasionally to society, her presence met with curiosity rather than contempt, her dignity unassailable. Together, they navigated a future shaped by consequence and choice, each step negotiated openly. Love grew not as fire, but as hearth, steady and sustaining, warming without consuming. Their intimacy was built of shared understanding, whispered conversation, and trust proven repeatedly. On an evening much like the first, with rain tapping gently at the windows, the Duke spoke words he had once feared to utter. He told Eleanor that he loved her not for what she endured, nor for what she inspired him to abandon, but for the clarity she demanded of him. He said she had taught him that loyalty without conscience was merely obedience, and that love, when chosen freely, was the highest defiance of all. Eleanor answered with a smile that carried scars and hope together, telling him that loving him was not forgetting the past, but honoring it honestly, without illusion. They did not marry quickly, nor with spectacle. When they did, it was witnessed by those who mattered, beneath open sky rather than vaulted ceiling. No empire shifted, no decree followed, yet something profound had been accomplished. A man raised to destroy had chosen preservation. A woman taught to endure had chosen agency. The narrator in me knows that history will not remember their names as legends, nor their choices as turning points. But in the quiet ledger of human courage, their story stands complete, written not in ink or marble, but in the irrevocable language of love chosen against power. And so it ended not with applause, but with hands intertwined by firelight. The storm finally passed, the future uncertain yet willingly embraced. In a world governed by whispers, they had spoken through action. In a society that prized dominance, they had chosen devotion. And though their story would fade from conversation, it would endure where all true romances do, in the silent understanding between two souls who dared to defy the roles assigned them, and in doing so, found a freedom no title could ever grant.